Hey there friends, welcome back to my channel. Are you ready to get a bit sophisticated today? I hope so because we're diving into a little bit of paleontology today, specifically extinct sharks. Now, paleontology is already a difficult field to study for a number of different reasons, but when you're researching an animal with no bones, there's a limit to what you can find in the fossil records since soft parts like, cartilage that entire shark skeletons are made of don't fossilize all that well. So keep that in mind as we continue talking about all of these extinct sharks. Today we're going to be talking about 5 of my favorite extinct shark species. No, the Megalodon is not in this list. However, to make it up to you, here's my Megalodon tooth. I think it's pretty cool. And also I'm going to put a link in the description of this video to a video that I did with SciShow all about the Megalodon and why it got so freaking big to begin with. Also, apologies if the audio quality isn't great. My phone is not working properly, so I cannot use my wireless plug-in mic. I don't know why, don't know what's going on, hoping to get it fixed soon. But enough about that, let's talk about some extinct sharks. First up we have Edestis, also known as the scissor-tooth shark, for obvious reasons. If you're nervous about a set of scissors the size of your arm coming to chop you in half while you're swimming, don't be. This species went extinct over 300 million years ago. You may be wondering how these jaws even functioned, and I say that because I very much was wondering the exact same thing. Researchers believed that the jaws would move towards each other, stop just short of colliding, and then pull back again. Essentially just chopping and slicing whatever prey animal they had in their jaws. Does this mean that the shark can never close its mouth all the way? Because that seems wildly uncomfortable. Now, the skull of this animal was found over 50 years ago, but it wasn't until recently that we had the technology to learn more about this animal from its skull, which is true of a lot of different fossils. But again, Edestis being a shark, its skeleton is made out of cartilage, and that includes the skull. And we know that cartilage doesn't fossilize super well, so coming across an entire skull in the fossil record is not common. That said, teeth are hard parts, so the teeth of fossilized sharks do fossilize very well, and we find tons of them in the fossil record. So for a lot of prehistoric sharks, teeth are the only thing that we have to go off of, making learning about them a lot more difficult. Look, I know firsthand how difficult it is to study pelagic sharks that live really far from shore, but I'm just grateful that my study animal is at least still alive. Moving on to prehistoric shark number 2, we have Xenacanthus, which is apparently ancient Greek for foreign spine. Now, I would say this is a pretty accurate name because the idea of having a giant railroad spike sticking out from your forehead seems pretty foreign to me. Xenacanthus was a fascinating freshwater shark genus that existed in what is now modern-day Europe, India, Australia, and the US. Now, that may make it seem like Xenacanthus was absolutely everywhere, but remember, 200 million years ago when this shark went extinct, our continents were mashed up in one giant supercontinent called Pangaea. So the idea that this 1 to 2 meter long weirdo could have existed on all of those different continents isn't that shocking. Why are we not talking about the head spike yet? Okay, fair enough, let's talk about that. I know 2 things about this head spine. 1, you could count the rings on the inside of it like tree rings to determine how old the shark was, which tells me that they didn't start with a giant head spine, they grew it over time. And 2, it appears to be a sexually dimorphic trait, basically meaning that it's a bit different between males and females of the species. Females actually had longer spines than males did. For what reason? I couldn't tell you. Regardless, I am imagining a Xenacanthus medieval duel. I'm not really sure how that would work, but that's what I have in my head and I think it's funny. On to number 3, we have Bandringa. I realized as I was writing this script that I have been saying its name wrong for a very long time. I used to think it was Budringa without the first N, but it is Bandringa, and that was a humbling realization. Anyway, Bandringa swam our swamps and seas about 310 million years ago. Fossil evidence of these sharks has been found in the Midwestern US, as that's the location of an ancient river delta that Bandringa would have existed in. But evidence of the shark itself isn't even the most interesting thing that paleontologists have found. They found fossil evidence of a shark nursery ground. For a long time, scientists thought that Bandringa was actually 2 different species of sharks, a freshwater species and a marine species. But upon further inspection, that doesn't really seem to be the case. Instead, researchers now believe that Bandringa was one species that lived in freshwater and would move out to sea in order to spawn, kind of like some modern-day eels like the American eel. While adult specimens have been found in areas that were previously covered by freshwater, egg cases and juveniles were preserved in areas that used to be coastlines. And I'm loving the idea of female Bandringas taking little girls' trip, a little vacay down to the beach to lay their eggs. Honestly, I'm a little sad that these cute little bottom feeders went extinct. Well, let me not call them little. Adults got to be around 10 feet long, but that just adds to how cool they are. Like, imagine the Florida Everglades with a 10-foot long, bottom-feeding, paddle-nosed shark. That'd be sick. For number 4, we have Tychodus. Now, this extinct shark lived between 105 to 75 million years ago, the newest shark of all the sharks on this list. By newest, I mean most recent, you get the idea. For a long time, we had no idea what this shark even looked like. Again, cartilage doesn't fossilize very well, so all they had to go off of was big, weird fossilized teeth. And if the sharks on this list are an indicator of anything, it's that prehistoric sharks didn't always look super sharky. So more evidence of the shark was needed in order to pin down exactly what it looked like. But in recent years, scientists have found a new specimen that will help address that exact mystery. The new specimen is basically a perfect imprint of this shark in rock. Skeletal structure, preserved muscle tissue, teeth, an outline of the shark. That's pretty much everything you could possibly need to figure out the shape of this shark and its fins. Not only does this help determine what the shark looked like, it can also clear up some of the uncertainties surrounding where this shark would have fit into its prehistoric ecosystem. Before, scientists thought that Tychodus took on both physical and dietary similarities to the modern-day nurse shark, eating benthic or bottom-dwelling animals and chilling on the ocean floor. But now it's described as looking like a bigger version of today's poor beagle shark and eating pelagic crustaceans like ammonites and possibly even turtles. Which may seem shocking until you realize that Tychodus grew to be about 10 or so meters long and had teeth perfectly built for crushing. It was like a living hydraulic press. And finally, my favorite extinct shark, Helicoprion. This 270 million year old power tool was also called the buzzsaw shark, which is an awesome name, though Helicoprion also sounds pretty cool. Some people call it Helicoprion, I call it Helicoprion. Scientific names have no real distinct pronunciation, so sound it out, and if you have all the letters there, you're probably fine. Now, it's pretty easy to see why they call it the buzzsaw shark. It's got a giant buzzsaw in its face that it used to chop big old cephalopods in half. And the reason we know they had this buzzsaw on their face is because they found fossils of tooth whorls, big old spirals of teeth. Spirals of teeth would be an awesome band name, but all of your band merch has to have Helicoprions on them. One of the reasons that this is my favorite extinct shark is because of the many hypotheses there were as to where this tooth whorl even was on the shark. One person thought that it belonged to a ray, sitting in its mouth like a big, weird death funnel or carnivorous can opener. Death funnel and carnivorous can opener would also be amazing band names. Another hypothesis was those weird, like, unfurling party thingies, but covered with teeth. I don't think that's a party I want to attend. But the reality of the situation might be even more terrifying. You know how shark teeth are kind of on a conveyor belt? They sit further back in their mouth in these back rows and they move forward and fall out when they get towards the front and they're continuously being replaced, right? Well, the idea with a Helicoprion is that their teeth would move forward and instead of falling out, they would embed back into the jaw, continuing to spiral in on itself until you have a big old tooth whorl. As the shark gets older, their teeth grow bigger and the tooth whorl gets larger. The smaller teeth are on the inside of the tooth whorl because they were created when the shark was younger, and then the larger teeth are on the outside of the tooth whorl because they were created when the shark got older. Those bigger teeth would be the most recently formed teeth. All I can say is that this seems 1,000 times worse than wisdom tooth surgery. I wouldn't know. I never had wisdom teeth. I was one of the lucky ones. But this seems like a jaw surgeon's dream. Or maybe their nightmare. Probably depends on the surgeon. So, extant sharks are pretty cool. But extinct sharks are unreasonably weird and impressive in very different ways. What's even more impressive is the amount of information we can learn about these animals that don't even exist anymore. And like I said, a lot of this information is learned through their teeth. If you want to know a little bit more about how paleontologists learn more about extinct sharks through their teeth, check out that link in the description of the SciShow video I did on the Megalodon. There's a lot about how the teeth were used in order to find out more about the Megalodon. And some very shocking things were discovered. And I am eternally grateful for all of the paleontologists that put in the work to learn all of this really cool information, because it is wicked cool, but it also seems really difficult. So shout out to the paleontologists out there. On behalf of people like me who find this stuff unbelievably cool, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you learned something new that you can use to annoy your friends at the next party you go to. And as always, have a great day and stay sharky, my friends.